Hey there, we are the Study Buddies. In today's mathematics section video, we'll be looking at inequalities. So if you want to know more about the properties of inequalities, the meaning of inequalities, so please do watch my video on real numbers, and around the 8th minute you can learn more on inequalities. So today we'll be focusing more on how to solve questions involving inequalities. So first let us look at this first category of questions, solving linear inequalities. So what does the word linear mean is actually that it means it only has x which has only power of 1. So which means it does not have x to the power of 2, 3, 4 and so on. So now solving linear inequalities involves only with x with the power of 1. So for instance, let's say I have a question of 2x plus 7 is greater than or equal to x minus 3. So how do I solve this question is that I'm just going to bring everything on the right hand side to the left hand side, therefore I'll make one side 0. So when I bring this to the left hand side, it's going to be 2x minus x plus 7 plus 3 which is greater than or equal to 0. So I solve this part, 2x minus x, I'm going to get x plus 10 is greater than or equal to 0. So now how am I going to find the value of x? Very logically, I'm just going to bring the positive 10 to the right hand side of the equation. So it's going to be x is greater than or equal to negative 10. So that's the whole solution for this question. So now let's take a look at our second example. Negative 7x plus 11 is greater than or equal to 2x minus 1. So again, we are going to do the same thing. First bring everything to the left hand side, make one side 0. So let's say I'm bringing the right hand side to the left. So it's going to be negative 7x minus 2x plus 11 plus 1 greater than or equal to 0. So I'll solve this part and I'll get negative 9x plus 12 greater than or equal to 0. So now I'm going to bring the 12 to this side, so it means it's going to be negative 9x greater than or equal to negative 12. So a very important condition when we solve linear inequalities is that the x variable should not be a negative. So how do we make it a positive is that we are going to change the whole equation to a positive. So logically what we are going to do is that negative 12, we bring it to the left hand side, it's going to give us a positive 12. Negative 9x, we bring it to the right hand side, it's going to give us a positive 9x. Okay, so by just changing the directions, you can actually make the whole equation a positive. So let's just do it. So 12 is greater than or equal to 9x. So we'll bring the x to the left hand side for convenience. So 9x is lesser than or equal to 12, and thus x is going to be lesser than or equal to 12 over 9, and therefore the answer is going to be 12 divided 9, which is 4 over 3. So this is what we have to do when we see both. When we want to change the negative symbol, we just bring it to the side which is going to be a positive. So that's what I did. Some people would just divide the whole equation with negative, which is also okay, but it's very important to remember to change the direction of the symbol. Like let's say if I want to divide this whole equation with negative 1, it's still correct, the answer is same, but I have to change this direction. If you look at it properly just now, when I did this method, it automatically changed without you realizing it, right? So that's why I would recommend this method. So now let's take a look at this third example of linear inequality. So 0 is lesser than or equal to x plus 3, and x plus 3 is lesser than or equal to 6. So if you notice that there are two inequalities in one question, so how do we solve it? So first step, you are going to split into two individual parts, which is 0 is lesser than or equal to x plus 3 and x plus 3 is lesser than or equal to 6. So we'll solve this equation first. So I'll bring everything to the left hand side. So I'm just turning the whole equation, and therefore x is going to be greater than or equal to negative 3. So I'll solve this one. X is lesser than or equal to 6 minus 3, and therefore we are going to get x is lesser than or equal to 3. So therefore we can see that in a number line, in a real number line, we're getting two answers, which is -3 and 3. So let's draw the inequality number line. So let's say x is greater than or equal to -3. So if it's a greater than, the arrow is going to move to the right hand side of the number. But then since there's an equal to, we have to shade it. Okay? And same goes to this part. X is lesser than, so which means it's going to go this side, and equal to 3. So equal, we have to shade it as well. Okay? So now this plays an important role. How do we determine the range of value x? So since we see the word n means intersection. So to know more about and or, please watch my video on sets. Okay, so n means intersection. So now we have to find the intersection of the both number lines, which is this part. So this part serves as the intersection for this whole question, and thus the answer for this question is x is in between of -3 and 3. It can be written in this way, or it can be written in an interval format as well. So to know more about interval format, please watch my previous video on inequalities. So now let's move to our next part, or the second part of this inequality solving thing, which is solving quadratic inequalities. So if you watch my video on quadratic equations, you'll be aware what's the meaning of quadratic, which means we have x to the power of 2 only. So any equation which has the power of 2, which is without fractions, is a quadratic inequality equation. So 3 ways to solve quadratic inequalities is by using the real number line method, graphical method, or table method. So now we'll be going through one by one how to solve questions involving these 3 methods. So now let's look at our first type of way to solve quadratic inequalities, which is real number line method. So let's say I'm having a question, 3x squared is greater than 5 minus 14x. So how do I start solving this question is that bring all on the left hand side to the right hand side, which is 3x squared plus 14x minus 5 is greater than 0. So once you bring it to the right hand side, you already have a quadratic equation here. So what you have to do, find the values of x respectively. So to do this, we have to do the quadratic equation, of course, either using any of the methods. So I personally prefer complete factorization, in which you'll get 3x minus 1 and x plus 5 equal to 0, and therefore the values of x are x equals to 1 over 3 or x equals to -5. Okay, so once we get to know the answers, what we have to do now is we have to start drawing the real number line. So what I'll use this space. So let's say this is the number line. So -5 would be coming first, followed by 1 over 3. Then I will just divide it using dotted lines. Okay, so now what we are going to do is that we are going to find 3 separate ranges. So -infinity to -5. So since this is there's no equal there, so it's just going to be an open bracket. This range is going to be -5 to 1 over 3, and this range is going to be 1 over 3 to positive infinity. Okay, so now what we are going to do is that we are going to substitute values from each of this interval into this equation. So let's begin. So from this part, from this interval, I'm going to choose I have to choose a number after -5. So I would advise you not to choose numbers very far from -5, like -10, -20, but just choose the number exactly next to -5. So for this case, I'll be choosing -6. So if I substitute -6 inside this equation, I'll be getting 3 times -6 squared plus 14 times -6 minus 5, in which I'll get positive of 19. Okay, so positive of 19 is a positive value, and therefore we are going to label this part as positive. So next, I'm going to choose a number in this range. So let's say I'm choosing -4, or maybe I can choose 0. I'll prefer choosing 0. So if you choose 0, it's 3 times 0 square plus 14 times 0 minus 5, and you'll get -5. So -5 is a negative value, and therefore we just label this as negative. And lastly, part after 1/3. So for this part we can choose both. Actually -4 also is going to give you a negative answer, so you can try it by yourself. And next we are going to find out whether this is positive or negative. So a number after 1/3, I can take 2/3, 3/3, which is 1. So I'll just take number 1. And I'm going to substitute inside this equation again. So 3 times 1. So now we have to find out what will be coming here, positive or negative. So what I should do is that I should take a number after 1/3. So it can be 2/3, 3/3, or which is 1. So I prefer taking number 1, and I'm going to just substitute inside this equation. So 3 times 1 plus 14 times 1 minus 5. So it means 3 plus 14 minus 5, in which we are going to get 12, which is a positive answer. Okay, so once we have found out these things, whether it's a positive or negative and stuff, we would come back to this equation. So in this equation, when you see that the equation is having a value greater than 0, we would be choosing the positive parts only. Okay, so in this case, since it's greater, we are going to choose the positive parts, and therefore the answer for this question is going to be -∞, -5 union 1/3 infinity. So this is the answer for this question. So now let's look at our second example. 2x squared minus x minus 1 is lesser than or equal to 3x plus 5. So as just now, bring everything to the left hand side, in which we are going to get 2x squared minus x minus 3x minus 1 minus 5 lesser than or equal to 0. So once we solve this, we are going to get 2x squared minus 4x minus 6 is lesser than or equal to 0. We can actually simplify this whole equation into x squared minus 2x minus 3 lesser than or equal to 0. So once we reach to this part, we see that it is a lesser than or equal to equation. We have to remember that we have to choose the negative part, not like the question just now, but now we have to choose the negative part when we do the real number line method. So first, before that, we have to solve this equation. So x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals to 0. After complete factorization, we are going to get x minus 3 x plus 1 equals to 0, where x equals to -1 or x equals to 3. Okay, so now let's draw the real number line. So -1 would come here, 3 would come here, put the dotted line, and we set the interval. So -∞ to -1 close bracket. So why do we have to close bracket is because this is having an equal symbol over here, and then for this it would be -1 to 3, and for this it's 3 to +∞ open interval. Okay, so now what we are going to do is that we are going to find out whether it's a negative or positive range for each of them. So for -1, we are going to take a number earlier than -1, which is -2, and substitute inside the equation x squared minus 2x minus 3, in which when we substitute -2 inside here, we are going to get -2 squared minus 2 times -2 minus 3, which is 4 plus 4 minus 3 is 8 minus 3, 5. Therefore it's a positive value. Okay, so for this part, -1, we can choose 0 or we can choose 2. So I prefer choosing 0, and when you choose 0, we are going to get -3. Okay, so once we get -3, we know it's a negative part. And for the third part, this part, I'm going to take number 4. So once I substitute inside this equation, 4 square minus 2 times 4 minus 3, it's going to be 16 minus 8 minus 3, which is going to give a 5 again. So when I get 5, it's a positive value, and therefore this part is also a positive part. So once I've already identified the positive and negative part intervals, what I would do, as I said before, we would have to look into this part. So once we see here, it's a lesser than or equal to graph. So when it is lesser than, automatically we are going to choose the negative range. Therefore, the answer for this question is -1, 2, 3 closed intervals. So why it is closed? Again, because of the equal symbol. So now let's move to our second part, which is solving using graphical method. So before I go into solving using graphical method, I would like to write down the general equation of quadratic equations again and focus on the part A. So in a graphical method, you should remember two important things. Let's say if A is greater than 0, remember that your graph is always going to be smiling, or which means the curve is going to be downwards and you will be having a minimum point. Let's say your A is lesser than 0, then your graph is going to be sad, which means you're going to have a maximum point. So to remember the shape of graphs according to the quadratic equation, or when you see the value of A, just remember if A is greater than 0, which means you're getting an A for your exam, you are happy, which means you'll be smiling. Or if it's A lesser than 0, which means you didn't get an A for an exam, you are sad, which means your mouth is like that. So you're going to get a curve like this. Okay, so let's move to our example. So let's see this example. Actually, it's the same question as I have did for the first question, but why I'm using the same question is because I want you to compare which method would be easier for you personally to find out the answer for this question. So once we look at this question, 3x squared plus 14x minus 5 is greater than 0. So what we are going to do is that we are going to focus on the value A. So A is equal to 3, and therefore A is greater than 0. So if A is greater than 0, which means you're getting an A for an exam and you're going to smile, which means your graph would be in this shape. Okay, so what you're going to do now, you're going to find out the roots of this equation. So 3x squared plus 14x minus 5 is equal to 0, and therefore you're going to get 3x minus 1 and x plus 5 equal to 0, and therefore your answer is x equal to 1 over 3 or x equals to -5. Okay, so now what you're going to do, you're going to draw the graph. So the graph touches at -5 and 1 over 3, and as we mentioned just now, the shape of the graph is a happy smiling face. Okay, so it touches at -5, it touches at 1 over 3. So now the challenge comes here. Where or what we have to do after this, we have to focus on this symbol. So if we see this symbol, we can see that the equation is greater than 0. So if it's a greater than 0, logically you're going to choose the positive part of the y-axis. So actually, to move it very detailed, this whole thing is equal to y. I mean, this whole equation is equal to y. Never mind, you're not going to focus on that part now. But since you see it's a greater than 0, you're going to choose the upper part, which is the positive part of y. So therefore, you're going to shade the parts outside this graph which we have drawn. So why? Because it's the positive part. That's all. Because it's greater than 0, we are going to shade the positive parts. So therefore, we get to know that the answer is x is lesser than -5 or x is greater than 1 over 3. As we can see here, x is moving this side, which is lesser than -5, and moving this side as well, which means it's greater than 1 over 3. So therefore the answer for this question, if we write it down in the interval form, it's going to be, I'll write it over here, it's going to be negative infinity, negative 5, open bracket, union 1 over 3, positive infinity. So that's all to solve this question. So let's move to our second example. As I mentioned, same example as just now. 2x squared minus x minus 1 is lesser than or equal to 3x plus 5. After simplifying, we are going to get x squared minus 2x minus 3 is lesser than or equal to 0. So first, look at the value of a. A is equal to 1, therefore a is greater than 0. Since you have got an a, you're going to smile now. So the shape of the graph is going to be in this shape. So now let's find the value of the roots. So x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals to 0, where x minus 3, x plus 1 equals to 0, x equals to 3, or x equals to negative 1. So since we already know the roots now, we just plot it on the graph and draw our graph. Okay, negative 1, 3. So comparing to just now's question, now we have the equation is lesser than 0. So if it's lesser than 0, which means we are going to move below the y-axis. So we are going to shade parts below this which are in this range. So we are just going to directly shade the lower part of this graph. So this is the range of this graph, and therefore the answer would be from negative 1 to 3. So which means our range is going to be from negative 1 to 3 only. So how do we write this as an answer in the interval form? Is that we're just going to write, okay, so I'll write the answer here. It's going to be negative 1, 3, both closed because it's an equal sign over there. So this is how we would solve questions involving graphical method. So now we are going to look at table method. So I'll directly explain how to use table method through the same example which I've used for the first question. So of course I would not like to repeat the same thing again and again. I would just show you what you have to do first, which is you have to bring it to the left hand side and find out the values of x, which is 1 over 3 and negative 5. So from this we can see we get 3 intervals, which is we are going to get negative infinity to negative 5, followed by negative 5 to 1 over 3, followed by 1 over 3 to positive infinity on a real number line, isn't it? So what we are going to do in table method is that we are going to draw a dotted line table on a number line. So you get it right, a dotted line table on a number line. So this method, if you ask me, it's a very long method, I would say, because it involves a lot of detail. So I'll write down the ranges here. So negative 5, 1 over 3, 1 over 3 to positive infinity. I would have to write the range over here, which is negative 5 and 1 over 3. Okay, so first step I would write 3x minus 1 over here. So 3x minus 1. Then I'll write x plus 5, and this whole equation comes here. Since I have no space, I'll just write it over here. Make sure you write the whole equation over here. Okay, so I'll put another dotted line over here, which means that these two times to each other, you'll get this answer. Like 3x minus 1, you times with x plus 5, then you'll be getting 3x squared plus 14x minus 5. Okay, so sorry, I'll just split this part. Okay, so focus on this part. So what we are going to do now is the same thing we did for the real number line system method, but now we are going to go much in depth. Okay, so first we are going to find out what would bring what this 3x minus 1 is going to bring for each range. I mean in terms of positive and negative. So let's start. So for negative 5, a number before negative 5 which I consider is negative 6. So once we substitute negative 6 inside this thing, it's going to be negative 6 times 3, which is negative 18, times negative 1, we'll get negative 19. So if it's a negative 19, it means that the answer in this range is going to be a negative. So for our next part, I can either choose negative 4 or I can choose 0, but logically I just prefer 0. So again, negative, because 3 times 0 minus 1 is going to be a negative 1. So negative. And for this last range, I'm going to choose a number after 1 over 3, which is number 1. So 3 times 1, I'm going to get 3 minus 1, 2. So 2 is a positive value. So in this place, we are going to get a positive answer. So now let's move to the second row, x plus 5. So again, I'm going to use the same numbers, negative 6, 0 and 1. And if I substitute in this, I'm going to get negative 1, which is still a negative value. And if I substitute here, it's positive because I'm going to get 5. And if I substitute in this, I'm going to get 6, again a positive value. So now we have to multiply all of these rows one by one to get an answer. So as I said, when you multiply these two, you're going to get the whole quadratic equation. Again, sorry I couldn't write it inside there. And then negative times negative. So what I'll get if I times negative with negative? It means I'm going to get a positive value. Positive times negative, obviously we're going to get a negative value. If I times a positive value with a positive value, I'm going to get a positive value. So this is how you have to solve table method. So you start with this, then you continue drawing this table and doing everything, and you have to find out these three. So these are the most important parts in this thing. So once you find out the positive and negative individually, you would have to check on this symbol. Sorry, you have to check the one which is in front of 0. So still the same. So in this symbol, you can see that it is the quadratic equation is greater than 0. So since it's a greater than 0, we will be choosing the ones with the ranges which have positive value, and therefore the answer for this question is going to be negative infinity, negative 5, union 1 over 3, infinity. So this would be the answer for this question. So now let's look at our second example. Again, the same example, and I'll just directly move to drawing the table. Okay, so we have to draw dotted line table. So since you'll be having the first range, which is negative infinity to negative 1, so this would be a close bracket followed by negative 1, 3, close bracket, again another dotted line, and 3 to positive infinity. Okay, and on this side we'll be writing values x minus 3, and for the second one x plus 1, and at last the product of both of these, which is going to yield a result of x square minus 2x minus 3. So I'll draw a complete number line over here, which has the values negative 1 and 3 respectively. Okay, so now what I have to do, again the same thing, I'm going to take values before negative 1, which is for this case negative 2, values after negative 1, 0, here it's going to be 2 and 4. Okay, so I'm going to substitute one by one into these both brackets. So let's say I'm going to take negative 2 and substitute inside here. I'm going to get negative 5, which is a negative value. 0, substitute inside this, negative 3, another negative value, and lastly 4, inside this 4 minus 3, you're going to get 1, which is a positive value. So now let's look at our second line. Negative 2, substitute inside this, you're going to get negative 1, again a negative value. 0, substitute inside this, you're going to get 1, positive value. 4 plus 1, 5, positive value. So multiply all the lines one by one. So I've already multiplied this here. So negative times negative value. So multiplying two negative values, you're going to get a positive value. Multiplying one negative value and one positive value, you're going to get a negative value. Multiplying two positive values, again you're going to get a positive value. So since you have found out all the positive, negative and positive for each of the ranges, now look back at the question. So the question is the equation is lesser than or equal to 0. So if it's lesser than, automatically we are going to choose the negative range, and therefore the answer for this question is going to be -1, 3 in close brackets, because it is a lesser than or equal to equation. So since there's an equal to, you're going to use closed interval. So I've already shown you 3 methods, so decide yourself. I repeat again, decide yourself which will be the best for you. And so that's all for this video, guys. If you like this video, do like this video, comment if you have any doubts, share this video to your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon. That's all for today. Thank you, take care, goodbye.